All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Shama. I am the program director here at Girls and Geese. We are super excited to have three amazing individuals on with us today. We're talking about a really important topic here that has been kind of making its way into the limelight a little bit, into center stage in Jiu-Jitsu, not enough in a lot of our opinions. With me, I have Averi Clements. She is I have you down as a managing editor, I believe. But
Former.
former
Yeah.
managing editor of Jiu-Jitsu Times. She's a brown belt under Nick Hughes at Trinity MMA. She's also an ambassador for Hooks. You can find her on Twitter and Instagram. We also have Ty Gay. He's a black belt owner and instructor at Redline Jiu-Jitsu. He's a huge advocate against sexual predators in Jiu-Jitsu. Last but not least, I have Liz Beaver. She's a health and fitness writer and host of the podcast Damn Well Better. So thank you everyone for being on today. I'm super excited to have you on and have this discussion.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to dive right into it. Today we are going to be talking about idol or hero worshiping and cult-like mentalities that can be found in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So what, in your guys' opinions, what does idol worshiping look like in Jiu-Jitsu? Or in the fitness world as well? I think that can extend out.
Liz?
Anybody?
Okay.
I have been doing a lot of research and podcasts and interviews with people who have been sucked into cults. And the thing about a cult that makes it different than any other group is the leader, is the idol. And when the people of the group, the gym, the organization start kind of wrapping all their activity around feeding the professor's ego instead of just getting better at jiu-jitsu, that's kind of what it looks like. So it could also look like a gym where you have a professor who is arbitrarily bestowing belts. You know, like some people have to work way harder than other people to get belts. It could be professors who are texting their students, who are having strange personal relationships with their students. And what it generally looks like, I think, when you walk into a gym is a bunch of people going, dude, that guy's a beast. And that's where it starts.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Jiu-jitsu is interesting in the sense that to a new person, it looks like you have superpowers, which I mean, Jiu-jitsu is kind of a superpower, but especially if somebody has never been in a position of power before and they rise to the level of black belt, it can affect their personality, we'll just say. And so it can not even be like that in the beginning, but over time, because people are calling you professor and they think, you're a beast and all these things. And then it does seem like magic how you can just, flip people around and have their lives literally in your hands. Like if you choke somebody too long, they die. So that's pretty profound. And what starts to happen is because of human nature, we like to put people on a pedestal, and we also like to believe in magic. So you mix those two things together and you end up with a cult. Jiu-jitsu is very culty. There's, in my school, we don't even have any, there's not, Elio Gracie's not on the wall in the main room, none of that stuff. So I'm like super far the other direction. I don't even make my students call me professor. They can call me coach. They can call me professor if they want, but I make them call me Ty. That's my name. My name is Ty. And so the ultimate goal should be, and the ultimate focus should be on jiu-jitsu. But because we're humans, it ends up not being that way. And then people start to use that and leverage it. And then over time, over a long period of time, slowly but surely turn into this cult mentality, And I don't think that everybody is necessarily just trying to be that way in the beginning, but it's just so easy to be that way over a certain amount of time. And so And if you put the wrong person in power, they'll run with it. And that's what's happened today, I think, in some jiu-jitsu circles.
Yeah, I think the hierarchy in jiu-jitsu and how that's enforced also really plays into that. Obviously, you have the belt structure, which really should only be an indication of how good at you are at jiu-jitsu, you know. But I think you see at a lot of schools, especially those more culty schools, it's treated like, I mean, like a cult. You know, people say like, oh, if you're a lower belt, you can't ask an upper belt to roll. You know, I've heard that at a lot of places. Or you can only, I mean, I understand some techniques are only allowed for safety and whatnot, but, you know, you get certain privileges if you're a certain belt level, which again, sometimes I understand that, you know, but in other situations, like it's a little bit weird to me how revered upper belts are, not even black belts, but also brown belts, even purple belts. And I think because of that structure in jiu-jitsu, and especially because of how the people who are in power in jiu-jitsu really emphasize that like jiu-jitsu is different. And I totally get that jiu-jitsu is a bit more practical than a lot of other martial arts, which also have their own merits and benefits. But I think that you see those memes where it's like, oh, there are black belts, and then there are black belts with the jiu-jitsu ones, you know. And because it takes so long to progress through each belt as well, I think it makes it even easier for those higher up people who abuse their power to reinforce that structure and that abuse of power and say like, oh, I belong here. I deserve to be this mat bully. You know, they call themselves a mat enforcer, but a lot of them are really just bullies because I've earned it, because I've been on the mat for 8, 9, 10 years and I've earned this place, you know, and you lowly peasant, you're the one who has to do all the peasant work. You know, you're always the one that has to clean the mats. You know, you can't speak to the professor or the master without permission.
Do you think it's the leaders that are instilling it, or is it the culture within the academy that's kind of perpetuating that kind of mentality? Like at a certain point, where does that fall on to continue that behavior?
So I'm going to start by saying something. I'm going to take it way back to the beginning. I think our culture, at least in America, we have always equated martial arts with mysticism. I mean, you look at the old Bruce Lee movies, Mr. Miyagi, you know, all that kind of stuff. We put this almost unnatural reverence on people who are good at martial arts to be these wise mystics, these people who are going to, you know, transcend us somehow into this other realm or whatever we think. Like they have some hidden knowledge, they have some secrets beyond, oh, I know how to footlock or choke somebody. And that's kind of where it all starts. I think we have this fascination with Eastern culture and foreign, you know, things, and we think it's almost more special than it really is. And that is all of our mindset when we first walk in the door, I think. So that's it's we're primed is what I'm saying. And
oh yeah,
I think it varies from you know, academy to academy how much that is encouraged, you know, but I think all of us, we're a little starry-eyed when we walk in there in the beginning.
Yeah. What are some things that I guess academy owners could do to I guess so if say you're an owner and you have an instructor and the instructor's kind of perpetuating this sort of idol worshiping environment, what are some things that you can do to kind of break that down? For instance, you know, if you have an instructor that leaves or whatnot, like what are some things that as an owner that we can do to kind of break down that mentality if you start seeing it within your school, within like even just with not even with the instructor, but just within the hierarchy of like the elite athletes, right? You run into that as well.
I think part of it comes from having a set of rules that are actually enforced and setting that culture yourself. Um, the people that you invite in for seminars, screen them beforehand, make sure that they're not the type of people who would be perpetuating these ideals, have an actual set of rules. Like, I'm actually shocked at how many academies don't actually lay out the rules for the gym, and it allows those coaches, those professors to abuse their position of power. And when they get called out on it, they just have to be like, well, I'm the coach and there's no rule for that. So like, where is this coming from? And they take it as a threat to their power, when in reality, the owner is just like, no, like I just don't want this culture in my gym. But also just educating your students as well. Like, I'm sure it's hard, if you're an owner, let's say you're just an owner of a gym and you invite a black belt into your school to teach and you don't know that much about jiu-jitsu. I think it makes it a bit harder. So just educating yourself a bit about like what we're doing here, having this discussion, looking for those resources, looking for resources for your students as well, where if they are mistreated by their coach, that they have somewhere to go for help as well, I think is important. It's not just dismantling it from the top. It's also saying, okay, we cannot prevent every single bad person in the world from entering martial arts. We know there's plenty out there, but also empowering the people below them to, seek help and to seek a better environment for themselves if they're not getting it there. Even if that means losing your students, even if that means your student comes to you and says, look, I am so affected by this experience, I can't be at your school. You as the owner need to be the one to say, to like accept that loss. Say, I get it, and I support you going somewhere else. Here's some resources that can help you.
What do you think, Ty? You're an instructor, you're an
Yeah.
academy owner. What are some things that you do within your school to kind of break down that kind of hierarchy? Or
Well, first, you with that whole thing about with great power comes great responsibility. It's that's an old saying for a reason. But again, a lot of the owners of the schools are the professors of the schools, and there's no incentive for them to make it any other way. I mean, so like I said before, it's like sometimes I don't think that they necessarily have the cult mentality in the beginning, but because it's so reinforced by our culture, by like was said earlier about like all these movies that we watched about how it was like mysticism and Bruce Lee, ninja movies, everything, Mr. Miyagi. The reason I do martial arts is because of the Karate Kid. So I was deeply immersed in that same kind of vibe, And when I found jiu-jitsu, it was like real magic. It really was, because it's like you can take a bigger person than yourself and you get into a fight with them and you can nullify all their punches and put them to sleep or kill them with your bare hands. That's a huge power. And I think if people or coaches or owners are not actively thinking about that issue, then it will sneak up on you. And next thing you know, you'll have that environment. And, but I mean, and this is just my opinion, but I believe that jiu-jitsu is designed to empower people, to empower the weak against the strong, the child against the bully, the woman against the violent man. And if it really is that, then you can't promote a cult type atmosphere, and it happens with good competitors, like really, really good competitors, because they get deemed as being a god among gods. And so it's super easy. I'm not going to mention any names, but I've heard of some interesting things where you can't even look the professor in the eye. If he walks in, you all have to line up. Don't look him in the eye. You can never ask him to roll. I mean, all these things. And it's like, this is bad for our art, because eventually it's going to end up being, what happens to all cults? Either the main leader starts having sex with all the women, or the main leader gets everybody to drink Kool-Aid and they all die. So we don't want to have some sort of issue like that with jiu-jitsu at some point. And because it's a male-dominated culture, it just lends itself to this weird cult vibe, So at my school, like I was saying, we we make it very, and I have talks about it all the time. I am not your life coach. I shouldn't do your taxes. There's many things that I just cannot do for you. I can barely even get this, my microphone to work here today to do this meeting. So that should tell you I'm good at like a few things. Jiu-jitsu is one of them, but that's it. Barring that, I'm just the regular person, you know. And I got into jiu-jitsu in the late 90s, and so back then it was even, I don't know, it was very culty, because there's only a few people that knew it, and if you knew it, you had a superpower. And back then, whenever you walked into a room, you could look through the room and see if anybody else did jiu-jitsu. Everybody knew everybody back then. So you could be in California on the beach and you go in and you see like a Machado guy or a Gracie guy, and you'd know who could own the room. And so they carried a lot of weight. And I think back then it was more like a gang type mentality, to be honest. And it has slowly shifted. I think that's because it's not easy to sell, as easy to sell being in a gang as it is, you know, jiu-jitsu's for everyone. That's the new thing. Oh, jiu-jitsu's for everybody, you know? And so I think that to prevent that cult type atmosphere, you have to actively be working against it. At our school, it's kind of like a running joke about being a cult. And it's because when you joke about something, I think comedy is the best way to unlock hard things to talk about. And so when you're joking about something, it makes it more palatable for people to kind of, you know, get behind. And like at my school, there is no like black belt stand in front and then the brown belt still behind them and then so forth and so on. I've seen that at a bunch of schools. This is separating the herd right there. And so I have everybody line up on the same wall. It doesn't matter who's in what place, because they're all equal. We're all equal. And it doesn't matter how much jiu-jitsu you know, you're still just a human being. And I think that, again, the owner or instructor has to be actively working against this, because you've got new people that come in again and view it as magic, because it feels pretty magical. Like I had this one student who is 30 something pounds, right? And his whole power lifter, and his whole life he'd been strong and everybody's scared of him type of thing because he's so big. But he comes in and like our smallest guys are just tossing him around like a pizza, you know? And that to those people is like, wow, this is truly magic, you know? And then with that, again, like the thing about martial arts and mysticism and all that kind of stuff, it's already there. It's like there's like a powder keg and you just have to light the match type of deal, you know? And so if the instructor or the association leader or whatever is not actively working against it, it will just manifest itself almost automatically.
What are some, in studying cults, Liz, what are some examples of cult-like mentalities that you've seen in jiu-jitsu?
So yeah, I can't say jiu-jitsu is a cult, but it is cult-like. In a cult, you have basically everybody rallies around a leader, and a charismatic leader is pretty much the focal point of any cult, right? And this leader has the answers. They have the answers to everything. And they have this transformative process that you have to embark on, okay? And I don't want to say embark on, I actually want to say submit to, because there's no room for doing it any other way than the prescribed way of the cult leader, right? And they employ behavioral control tactics, you know, how you dress, what you look like, the things you can say and cannot say, the things you can do and cannot do. And they also employ social control tactics, who you can hang out with, who you can talk to, who you can see. And that usually just involves you alienating yourself from your greater friends and family and immersing yourself in this little group. So, depending on the professor, like Ty was saying before, there are a lot of what we would call the preacher turned egomaniac. You know, the person that comes in and they start getting this adoration and they get off on it, and then they turn into a tyrant. They become, you know, the king of their castle. You will see a lot of that to varying degrees. You'll also see the narcissist. And narcissists are people who at some point have had their ego completely smashed. They've been traumatized. They've been totally humiliated. And instead of healing from that humiliation, going, you know what, I'm a regular person like everyone else, they go, you know what, I am not like these plebes down here. I am this great golden god and I know all the answers. And, you know, they separate themselves from people. And you will get that too. So depending on what gym you're in, look at the professor, look at the gym owner. Are they great golden gods bestowing information, or are they, you know, good people that are just trying to coach your jujitsu? Behavior control. How far on the spectrum are they of, you have to wear our gis, you have to, like, all of our patches, all of our rash guards, you have to buy all this stuff, you can't train at other gyms, you know, you have to move out of the way, you can't look at the professor, you can't, you know, you can't ask people to roll. How controlled of, you know, is your behavior? And the social controlling. I think if you find yourself withdrawing from life, withdrawing from the things that you loved, withdrawing from your friends and family to make everything about jujitsu, that's sick, you know? And I think it's kind of encouraged, and it's encouraged because, you know, they want you to keep paying your dues on one hand. And again, some of these people just want to keep you controlled. It depends on which school you're at. They're not all terrible. But you have to, those are kind of the red flags that you have to start watching out for. Is this jujitsu academy controlling you as a human being? You know what I'm saying? Or are you just going there like a gym and having a good time and getting better at jujitsu? Like, and it's usually a spectrum.
Mhm. What about you, Avery? What other mentalities have you seen in the jiu-jitsu community that could be described as cult-like?
I mean, I had this discussion with Liz a couple weeks ago. She really nails it there. And she also brought up a good point, that it's kind of piggybacking off of what she just said. But yeah, there's kind of this weird expectation in jiu-jitsu where, like, you need to show up to every single class possible, like even if you're just a hobbyist, you know. And I was sucked into that for a long time, you know, as a blue and a purple belt. I've never had any aspirations for being, you know, a world champion. I was doing it like, oh, I want to win a few local tournaments and like have fun, and like I had my own motivations, right? But even with that, you do kind of get that pressure, not only from your coach, but also from your peers, from the internet. You know, like people tend to look down on hobbyists, you know, that are showing up once a week or twice a week, or, you know, kind of disappear for a couple weeks and come back. And it's a little bit ridiculous, hey, you know, just like, this is supposed to be something we enjoy. You know, it's something that a lot of people do. You know, and people say, oh, well, like if you're a parent, it's okay, or if you're older, it's okay. But like, what if I'm not? What if I'm just an average everyday person? I have a couple hobbies. Jiu-jitsu happens to be one of them. And there is really that weird reinforcement that happens there, where you have to show up all the time, not just like so you can get better, not in a positive way, like, hey man, like I know you really want to win XYZ tournament. In order to do that, here's what has to happen. But like, oh, like you're being soft if you're not showing up to every class, you know, like why are you being a wuss? Why are you not staying for 2 classes in a row? And it's a very physically and emotionally and mentally demanding sport, you know. And so I've seen that happen a lot. Obviously you see it with like gyms that really enforce the no cross training, or like, oh, you have to check with me before you cross train. Like, I'm a paying customer. Like, why do, like, I always have what I call like the coffee shop principle, which I kind of discussed a little bit with Steve Kwan from BJJ Mental Models. But it's basically like, you know, you treat your jiu-jitsu gym like you treat your favorite coffee shop. You know, like maybe they give you some freebies. Like if you're a regular, like maybe you give them some tips, like you help each other out. But ultimately, like if the coffee's not good, you can leave and go somewhere else and never go back there again. Or if you decide, hey, I don't want to go to this coffee shop one day, I want to go to this coffee shop, like who cares? Like you're a paying customer and you should be allowed to do that. Like it's not a betrayal of your favorite coffee shop to get coffee from somewhere else. Like, why is your coach, why is the coffee shop manager telling you where you can or cannot get your coffee from? You know what I mean? So that's also a bit of, that's a huge red flag to me. That's always been a big red flag to me, to the point that like obviously I've kind of moved around the world, and I would straight up not even consider training somewhere that had restrictions like that. That it's like where I have to go ask daddy if I can go train somewhere else, for a day or whatever. Like, obviously I'm training with you, with, my current instructor, because I value your teaching. I value the academy. I like the environment. So no, I'm not going to go sign up somewhere else, give all my money to somebody else. But if I want to go to an open mat somewhere else, or if I want to take a class from someone else, like my coach is always like, yeah, like, why are you asking me? Like, just go, and I think that's really valuable.
Can I piggyback on that just for a quick second?
Of course.
You mentioned having clear goals and a clear path to those goals. That's a green flag. The red flag in a lot of jiu-jitsu gyms is, well, get better, try harder, do more. And you're like, well, try harder what? Do more of what? If you have a bunch of people in the jiu-jitsu gym that aren't necessary, that are spinning their wheels, grinding their gears, nobody knows who's going to get a belt, and I don't know, and and that kind of stuff, that's a red flag. When your coach can't tell you what you're doing wrong, what you need to improve on, and you just have to kind of hope he notices something and might give you a stripe, like that kind of thing is a red flag to me of cultery.
And if I can piggyback on that further, I know that there are a lot of people who say, like, let's say it's promotion day and you don't get promoted. And they say, oh, like, I don't understand why I didn't get promoted. Can I go to my coach and ask them? And you see people going, oh no, like, that's a big faux pas. Like, don't do that. And that's very strange to me, because you should absolutely be able to go up to your coach, not in a whiny, like, why didn't I get a stripe sort of way, like, but in a way that says, hey, I felt like I was here. You don't think I am. What do I need to do to get there? What am I lacking? What are you looking for? That should absolutely 100% be a conversation that you can have with your coach. And like you said, Liz, if it's not, like, if you're have that defined, if they don't know, or if they don't know, because they know why they're promoting certain people, or if they can't tell you why, like,
You think, Ty, is there anything else you'd like to add in?
Well, I mean, they're 100% on point with that. And that's something that I talk with students about a lot. If you have questions about something, you need to feel free to ask. I had a blue belt who's one of my affiliates, and he came to one of my other black belts and was like, hey, I don't want to ask Ty, but what do I need to do to get to purple belt, And my black belt, Chase, he was like, oh, go ask Ty. That's who you should ask. And so, although he's been with me the whole time, he's online, he's watching what other people are saying about that kind of stuff. And so we absolutely make it to where they can talk to us about anything, but because of the culture online, it makes it to where people are scared to talk about it because it's taboo, kind of, And nobody wants somebody to whine about stuff. Well, he got promoted and I didn't get promoted. No one wants that. But you should definitely be able to say, hey, what do I need to work on to get to my next goal? And if your professor can't tell you that, then, man, he shouldn't be your professor. If you're good at jiu-jitsu and you have students, you know what they're good at, or unless you just have so many freaking students that you can't keep up with them. And if you've got so many students and so many affiliated schools that you can't keep up with them, you need to figure out how to track that better. For us, we have cards that track, like from white to blue belt, we have special curriculum that you have to know, and you take a test for it to be able to get to blue belt. So there's a finite way to get there, and you start with 100 points, and you have to make at least a 90 on the test. And everything you do wrong is a point off on that test. And it just gives people a tangible thing to be able to focus on to try to get to their goal. After that, we still have cards, but it's just tracking your mat time. So there's 3 things that help you get promoted at my school after you're a blue belt, to go to purple, brown, and black. And that is mat time, which we track with cards, instructor evaluation. That means all the black belts at the gym are always evaluating you. And then the most important for me, character development. Character development just means that if you're an asshole, you're not going to make it. I'll boot people out. I don't care what belt they are. I've let brown belts go before black belt because they just couldn't pull it together and were turning into kind of mat bullies and whatever else. And so, see ya. You know, there's not enough time in life for me to be able to attach myself with somebody who I don't believe represents what I'm doing. You know, and so super important, I think. Yeah, and so you should make it to where people know that they're paying for a service. That's what's so screwed up about jiu-jitsu. You go to a jiu-jitsu place, you're paying them, and they make you feel like, oh, you're the, you know, like they're paying you, but they're not. You're paying for a service. Like the coffee shop analogy. If you don't like how the service is, then you should bounce. And I understand some gyms will do things where, you know, buy our stuff and that kind of deal. And it's a money making thing. Jiu-jitsu coaches or gym owners don't make that much money. So they're trying to maximize the way that they can make money. So I get that. Our school, we don't do that just because I'm, again, so far on the other side. I'm letting them wear whatever they want. We have patches that you can put on your gi, but we let them kind of do whatever they want and used to. So I'm from the Gracie group. And for most of my life, I was only able to wear a white uniform. And once I turned into a black belt, I did away with that at my academy. Because I don't like it. I want to be able to do what I want. And I like black gis and I like, you know, other kinds of gis. And so I think you should be able to do that. And so I understand, you know, there's kind of a way to make money, but it can also turn into a deal where it's a control factor for the owner or cult leader, whatever you want to call them. And then when they get, so just talking about red flags for a second, if you have an instructor that gets mad because you're going to an open mat somewhere else, man, that's an issue. That is an issue. Now, I get it. Some people would say, well, because of COVID, we don't want to get our bubble infected by somebody else. But really, you're not going to be, if you're open, then your bubble is open. You know what I'm saying? That's an unfortunate truth of it. So if somebody is so hell-bent on you can't go train other places, you can't go to open mats, then they have a control issue themselves, you know? And so that's just one of the things that you should look for. You should be able to talk with your instructor. If you have an issue with any of the students, you should be able to talk with your instructor about it, and it shouldn't feel weird. And because you have the online jiu-jitsu world constantly working against that idea, you have to constantly work to make them feel good about it. It's your job to make them feel like you're there for them. You will listen to what they have to say. And then the other issue with certain people get promoted because they're kissing the ass of the professor more. That's absolutely wrong. If you're in that kind of environment, you should bounce. What's weird, though, just like, you know, I watch that McDojo channel all the time. It's fascinating to me how we get these no-touch knockout guys, right? And then they'll have students who believe in it. They believe in it so much that the instructor believes in it. And it's this weird feedback loop that's going on. It's like, where the fuck did this come from? So, yeah, you just got to be careful and actively work against that stuff. And if your instructor is not doing that and not making you feel like you're paying him for a service and that they're there to help your jiu-jitsu get better, then you need to bounce. You know, I have this email where it's called exposing sexual predators and BJJ, or exposing BJJ sexual predators, or exposing BJJ predators at gmail.com. Anyway, I've had a lot of people send me emails and stuff about people who they feel like are sexual predators. And the thing that has shocked me the most was when women would tell me, well, I know that's just how it is in a gym. People are going to make sexual comments. People are going to do X, Y, and Z. Like, everybody knows that you have to kiss the ass of the professor. And if you're not doing it, you're not going to get promoted as fast. This is like a common thing that I hear about, and it blows me away. So it's like commonplace. And that's got to change, you know. And how does that change? Well, I believe it comes from the top down. So if you're the head of a huge organization, say you're Hodge or Gracie or heat on Gracie or any of these guys that are way up the chain, John Danaher, any of these guys that are way high up there that have a lot of pull, they need to actively work to make sure that the culture is the right kind of culture for us to move forward with. And it's in our best interest to make it that way. Because again, if we go down the other way, the cult way, too far, you're going to end up with something bad, something real bad. We've already ended up with bad stuff with sexual predators and stuff, right? So we need to make sure that it doesn't get even worse. Because I mean, again, real cults end in two different ways typically, with the main guy having sex with all the women or the main guy offing everybody and himself. So
yeah. Where is that line? Because I mean, jiu-jitsu, martial arts, they have that traditional aspect to it, right?
sure.
So where is that line between traditions and honoring the traditions and kind of leaking over into that cult like mentalities, like the bowing in, the bowing to the masters, it's very old traditions, right? Is how we
Yeah.
look at it. So I'm curious to see where you guys think, like, is there a place for these traditions?
I mean, I think a lot of the traditions that we put into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like bowing is not a part of Brazilian culture. I understand Jiu-Jitsu comes from Japan and has, those roots in Asia, but I feel like Western society in particular has kind of bastardized that. And instead of like being about respect, it is about reinforcing that hierarchy, and like, I'm not saying that, oh, like bowing to your teammates at the end of class is like the worst thing that can happen. Like, I get it. Like, it's just kind of part of jiu-jitsu. But I do think it's kind of ridiculous that we're taking, Brazilian jiu-jitsu has some really awful, violent, and even, racist roots, where these guys were going and beating people up. And it was, that's not something you should aspire to. You know what I mean? And so when you see that kind of stuff cropping up again, it's like, okay, like if you're bowing in, you bow before you get on the mats. Like if you're using that as a way to kind of like switch on, because I know some people do that to say like, okay, it's go time. That's just what they do. Like, that's fine. Like, that's your personal choice. But if you are bowing to a dead guy on the wall, a little bit weird, like I feel like there's levels to it. I don't think bowing is the worst thing that you can do, for example, but like, I don't know. I feel like, again, you just kind of need to look at the history of jiu-jitsu and say like, really, Brazilian jiu-jitsu does not have these like very honor-based roots. It has very violent roots, very, very cult-like roots, honestly. And I think therefore it's okay to step back from that and say, it's okay if my school is not being super traditional. It's because I know I'm kind of rambling a bit here. But I do think people should use their best judgment and talk to other people as well. I know Ty mentioned, like, you go online and you see all these opinions, and those opinions of, especially I do feel like blue belts and some later white belts tend to be the most vocal, because that's kind of it's kind of like early adulthood, where like you think you know everything, but like you don't. You have 1 foot in knowledge and 1 foot in knowing nothing. And so you do tend to see that as being people who are the most vocal. But look at people who have been in the sport for a while. Look at people who have been speaking out about this stuff and talk to them. Like if you see people, and I'm not necessarily saying myself, but you look at people like yourself, for example, Shama, or Ty, or Liz, there's a ton of people online who are really advocating for better spaces in jiu-jitsu. I know there's like Sucker Free Jiu-Jitsu is a big advocate for that. Look at people who are looking to make jiu-jitsu a more inclusive and safe space, and say, what are you doing in your gym? Don't necessarily look to these famous jiu-jitsu guys who are at the top. Look at people who are actively working to make it better and say, hey, my school does XYZ. Is this bad, or is this just like a quirky little jiu-jitsu thing? And I think you'll find a lot of those people will be happy to talk to you about that. because again, they're actively working to make jiu-jitsu a better place. So look at the, you always hear that quote, like, look for the helpers. And I think that applies to jiu-jitsu as well.
You
I
know,
think one thing that's interesting is that, let's say bowing. So like judo, for example, is very Kano. He wanted to do something that, because I mean, jiu-jitsu at the time was the leftover warrior class, and they were considered kind of thugs. And so Kano made judo to where they have more honor and respect and admiration for the instructors, and it's called ancestor veneration, I believe, is where they respect the people that came before them. But what that gets turned into when you put it into Brazil, which is part of machismo culture is just macho culture, right? It's what they look at it like. But it's a very that's where you get, now it's not about respect, now it's about idolization, right? And because of machismo culture and macho and this, that, and the other, that's where we've gotten that from. So it's taken what was respect driven and turned it into idolization. But here's the good news, I think, is that we're Americans and we Americanize everything. So we need to Americanize jiu-jitsu. So it's, was it Brazilian jiu-jitsu? Yes. It was Japanese jiu-jitsu before that. Yes. And now it's in America. So, and I know there's people out there saying, let's do American jiu-jitsu now. I think it's just jiu-jitsu, right? We're in America, we do jiu-jitsu, and we need to make sure that we're doing something out of respect as opposed to idolization. And how do you know the difference between that? I think it is when you're showing respect to somebody that has mutual respect for you is respect. When you're showing respect to somebody that's not feeding that back at all, that's idolization, and you're just reinforcing that idolization. And so if you're bowing and whatever, it's fine as long as it's not done to where, and you can tell there's a distinct difference. But when you're having to go to a school and you're bowing to a picture and then you're bowing to a picture of the instructor, it's walking a fine line to where it could be more culty. I think bowing before class or after class is fine, but when you're having to do it to specific individuals, and that's where we kind of go down that road. And again, we took Japanese culture, threw it into Brazil, and Brazilianized it, which is the machismo culture, and now it's here. And now it's up to us. What are we going to do with it? Used to, the Brazilians were the gatekeepers, right? Before that, the Japanese were the gatekeepers. But now we are the gatekeepers. So it is up to us to change the environment that we are in.
What were
I'm
you
going to
add in?
respect. Yeah. Could I just give a little bit of
Go,
respectful
go.
pushback to that? A lot of the issues with the cult-like vibe in jiu-jitsu I feel come from a lot of American grapplers. In that sense that, like, and I mean, we have to remember too, jiu-jitsu is growing all over the world now. Like, I'm obviously like in Australia, which is still a very westernized culture, but I do think we have to be careful about saying, there's a lot of overlap between the machismo that we see in Brazilian culture and Latin American culture. I lived in Costa Rica, like I've seen it firsthand, but there's a lot of overlap between that and the stuff we see in the US.
Sure.
Yeah, and I know you agree with
judo? Why don't we see that same thing in judo?
I honestly don't know anything about judo, so I couldn't tell you.
In judo, it's like, and maybe it's because it's in the Olympics or whatever, but there's a different kind of admiration that goes on in judo in America than in jiu-jitsu schools. It's very different. I trained with Pat Burst here at USA Stars when I first started out in the 90s because there's no jiu-jitsu schools around. He's an Olympian. And they have a certain amount of respect on and off the mat that is just different than Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And I think that is just, we as humans, we mimic things, right?
Yeah.
And when it came to us, it came from Brazil. And so we kind of mimicked that. And again, with the variables that we have to play with here, because we think of it like mysticism, it's kind of magic and all that stuff mixed in with, this is how we were taught to do it. And it was, I can't remember what the Portuguese phrase is for it, but it translates into all fights should smell of blood, right? And that's how they used to be. And it wasn't like we were trying to teach women how to protect themselves and teach kids how to be not bullied. It was about like going in and wrecking shop on people, dojo storming. I mean, they were
Yeah.
dojo storming back in the day. And so, and that mentality, we just kind of mimic. And because judo is different, didn't come from Brazil to here, came from Japan to here, we mimic that. And again, it maybe have a little bit more reinforcement because it is in the Olympics or whatever. And so it's more world renowned, and they have a certain structure that everybody has to follow. But yeah, I've noticed a very stark difference between judo clubs and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu clubs, but it's just not true. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like there's definitely a difference there. But I think you touched on something important, which was the regulation in judo, which we really don't have in jiu-jitsu at all.
No.
You know, like when all the stuff with fight sports was happening, somebody outside of jiu-jitsu was like, oh, so what happens now? Like the big jiu-jitsu federation, like what are they going to do about it? It's like, there's
Is it
really
because
anything.
judo stops at the throw? Jiu-jitsu stops when you can kill somebody, but like judo just ends at the throw. It's like, I bested you, sir, and it's done. Like
That's
it's
only recent,
almost
though.
I'm just asking. I don't know anything about judo either.
Yeah.
I was just listening and posing the question.
Yeah. Judo used to have what's called neowaza, more neowaza, and that's just the ground fighting portion of judo, which was jiu-jitsu. It used to be jiu-jitsu masters practice the art of judo. And of course, that's a little bit different now. And in the Olympics, I'll get on this topic, but the Olympics have watered down judo a whole bunch. They've taken away most of the time that you can spend on the mat doing basically jiu-jitsu, grappling. And they've also taken away like where you can touch the legs to do takedowns and stuff like that. So they keep carving away different things. You can't break grips with two hands in judo. You have to break with one hand. So, I mean, there's just a million different things that they've kind of taken out. But they were able to do submissions and the whole 9 yards too. And they still do some. They have a very limited time. I'm not exactly sure what the time limit is nowadays on the neowaza portion, but it's way different. And so, but yeah, I agree that jiu-jitsu is like, nobody comes to my school because they want to do like positional training. No one comes to my school because they want to take somebody down. They'd be doing wrestling or judo, right? They're coming for the submissions. And so it is a different mindset, definitely. So it could be partly that you're ending in something that could kill somebody, I guess.
Do you think that the lack of a governing body, the history of the sport, do you think that's what makes jiu-jitsu more vulnerable than any of the other sports to the issues that we see now?
I think it's the thing that makes it vulnerable and also that makes it awesome. Because if let's just say we got jiu-jitsu into the Olympics. Well, you're going to have either gi or no gi. It won't be both. And so whatever gets picked, the other one will suffer. All of the different styles of tournaments that are out there, I feel like are growing the art in a much faster way because we're going through different branches, right? So we're growing multiple branches at the same time. When you isolate it and make it have one branch, it only grows one way. For example, judo, now they can't do hardly any ground techniques, and judo guys are getting worse and worse at ground stuff unless they do jiu-jitsu. They obviously now are not good at attacking the legs for throws because it's just not in the rules anymore. And so I think that it is a good thing for jiu-jitsu not to have a specific governing body that makes everything one way, but it's also bad in the same sense because now we got no governing body, and when something like fight sports happen, you can't kick them out of that governing body. But we do have some loosely organized stuff like IBJJF, like ADCC and things like that. And if these guys would step up and say, okay, listen, if you've got if you're on a sexual registry somewhere, you can't compete, it would do a lot.
I mean, the IBJJF does have that. It has not necessarily been enforced, which again is the problem because they're less of an organization, more of a company. Right. They don't support athletes. They take your money and they let you compete in their tournaments. Like they've let convicted sexual predators very recently. And this is a whole email discussion I'm involved with now. But very recently, they've let a sexual predator compete in one of their events.
Wasn't Lloyd Urban in there competing too? Not very long
Yeah,
ago.
but yeah, I'm saying somebody.
There's been hundreds of them actually. I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
so for me, you know, as I understand, I'm not a high level competitor. You know, I'm not. You know, I've covered a lot of jujitsu, high level jujitsu, but like I don't really care about it that much. But I am way more concerned at the moment with how out of control that stuff is than,
Me too.
you know, like I agree with you, Ty, in terms of like I think there is the risk of it being watered down with that stuff. But at the same time, like I love that exploratory, you know, all the different rule sets and seeing how jujitsu can be branched out. But for me, you know, obviously, not only as myself, a woman in jujitsu, but having so many friends in marginalized communities who are affected by these terrible things that have been happening. Like my number one concern right now is that to get the bad people out. You know, like we can deal with the other stuff later and have those arguments later, but like you know, I can't believe that we don't have some governing body saying, you know, this isn't allowed. If you do this, you cannot be a legitimate coach anywhere.
I agree.
Yeah, that's my number one concern at the moment.
Yeah, I think we should have some sort of governing body that's like watching for that kind of stuff. It doesn't necessarily have to make the rules of anything, but somebody that would say, hey, listen, you're not a part of the official whatever, you know. And so but the problem with that is you get into if it's a for-profit type organization, you know, money screws up everything. So I mean, IBJJF is they're a for-profit company, so they're doing things for a profit. The Olympics, believe it or not, is a for-profit company, and they're doing things for money too. So we need some sort of way. But here's the problem with it: like, who would get under an organizing body of something without some sort of? There has to be some incentive to be there. I think if places like ADCC and IBJJF would legitimately adhere to certain rules from some organization or whatever, then maybe that would be the steps to take it in the right direction. Because again, we just need incentives somehow. And if you were incentivized by, if you did something wrong, you couldn't do ADCC trials, for example, it would, I feel like, make people at least try to do better. I don't know if they would or not. They're humans. And yeah. So
what do you think, Liz?
Yeah, go ahead, Liz.
I think Ty hit on a really good point. I think we have to be real, all of us, when we say why we do martial arts. And we say it's to get healthy, it's to learn how to deal with pressure in life, and it's not. We all want to kick ass. That's the thing. That's what everybody wants to do. And there's two camps of people that, you know, want to learn how to beat people up. There's people who just want to be safe. They want to defend themselves. They want to defend their friends. And there's also people who want to dominate other people.
Yeah.
So those are the two groups of people that are joining jujitsu and many other martial arts. Just because we call it an art, we pretend it's not martial, and it is. Everybody, all of us do this to learn how to beat people up. And until we are all very honest with ourselves about that, we're never going to even open our mind to the possibility that jujitsu doesn't beat the ego out of everybody. In fact, it amplifies the ego of people once they really know how to murder other people, you know, and until we start realizing that, we're never going to enforce predators to register or, you know, like to be kicked out of anyone. Nobody's going to stand up to anybody, right? Another thing, when we talk about the beginning of jujitsu, Averi, right on the button, jujitsu was not respectful. The guys who created jujitsu did a cool thing. They made jujitsu more compatible for the smaller, weaker person. And they took that style and they took it to UFC and they just blew everybody's minds, you know, back in like, what was it, the late 80s and, you know, stuff like that. And everybody was like, oh my God, I got to be like Hoist Gracie. But not a lot of people have gone online and read what Hoist Gracie has to say about women, what Hoist Gracie has to say about other people. Not we all, because I don't, but like a lot of people about a Helio Gracie, because, you know, he's the granddaddy, you know, and how many people have read his Playboy interview? And there you go. I would encourage everybody listening to this, go Google Helio Gracie Playboy interview, and you tell me if you want to bow to him. You know, they were street gangs. They were, you know, dominating each other, beating each other up. That was the roots, and that was what was brought over here. I don't think the problem is when it came to America, we had this more starry-eyed, you know, vision of quote martial arts. We had the kung fu movies and the karate and, you know, kind of stuff that, yeah, gets you in shape, and it can help self-defense to a point, you know, but it's not a killer sport. A lot of those things aren't killer sports, right? So now you bring jiu-jitsu over, and it is a killer sport to a bunch of, you know, starry-eyed people that are ready to, oh, he's a beast, he's a killer, he's amazing, oh my God, he's done so much, he's such a great guy. And that's what happened. You get this kind of cloud of a perfect storm for cultish attitudes. And then they're competing for students, they're competing for salaries, they're competing for adoration and respect. And it was a perfect storm. And if we don't all look at it and see it for what it is, we're never going to go into the future with an open mind about it. We're going to be trying to fix things like, well, maybe if ACDC or ADCC like didn't allow molesters, you know, but I think what it's going to be is it's going to be us. We have to do it. We all have to open our eyes and go, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to do these traditions anymore. I think it's this comedian, Doug Stanhope, has this thing about dead people's baggage. And he's talking about wars, you know, that people are fighting forever. And he's like, that's dead people's baggage. It's not mine. And I feel we have to start letting dead people's baggage be dead people's baggage and move forward the way we want to go and create schools that have these new mentalities and innovate. And like Ty said, make it more American Jiu-Jitsu or something new, evolution. And I think evolution is going to be the only thing that gets us out of the mess we're in.
Absolutely. What are some I want to kind of jump into some of the repercussions of like having these idol worshiping cult like mentalities. Like what are some extensions and kind of casualties, if you will, of these kind of environments?
Sexual abuse is a huge one, and it's one of the most common ones. You also have, so what I see a lot are people who are just kind of broken by jiu-jitsu. They've been told to train through all these injuries and go harder and go faster and go stronger with no respect for the fact that this person might have a full-time job, 3 kids, you know, that kind of stuff. I think we touched on the differences of training between a hobbyist and a competitor, right? And when everybody's being told to train like a competitor, you're just busting up a lot of people. And that results in a lot of low self-worth, depression, anxiety about coming to class, anxiety about not coming to class, a lot of symptoms of just mental injury and illness, you know, on low levels around jiu-jitsu, and broken marriages because people have affairs at the gym or they're never around anymore. Families that don't have their, you know, mom or dad around because they're so into jiu-jitsu. All those kind of like little small things that we don't necessarily see as being dangerous, but when you step back and look at the fallout, I mean, the interviews I've been doing, it's just people are a lot more broken about these gyms and jiu-jitsu and things than they let on.
Yeah, I think something that you and I touched on, Liz, like when we chatted a few weeks ago as well, is when you leave a jiu-jitsu gym, for a lot of people, it's leaving your entire social circle. and that makes it even more damaging. It's not, I mean, I know some people are very attached to, their machines and weights type of gym, their conventional gym. But like, if you get kicked out of a jujitsu gym, it's not just like, oh, like, I'm just going somewhere else. Like, I'll see you guys later. A lot of the times, the instructor will turn their current students against the student that left, even if that student left voluntarily, whether they got kicked out, whether they just found somewhere better, whatever. And that is extremely emotionally damaging, to somebody when we talk about like, oh, like all my friends are from jujitsu. And I know right now that's kind of the case for me, just like by happenstance, being so immersed in the community for so long. But that can really, really shake people up. Like imagine one day you wake up, your instructor says, hey, you went and trained somewhere else for the last time, like get out of there, go train there permanently if you love it so much. And suddenly all these people that you were seeing every day are no longer in your life. The instructor has said, oh, had to kick this person out. They were a traitor to the gym. They were dishonest, they lied, whatever. And so exactly. And so suddenly all these people who are your close friends, not only are they, not in your life every day, but they have been poisoned against you and they hate you. Like that can really mess up somebody psychologically.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
It's like the whole family thing, like we're family, right? You instill that. And so then all of a sudden you have your family turning against you, you know?
Mm-hmm.
What are some things that we don't see as issues that are bubbling to the surface that you see that could potentially become issues as a repercussion of this mentalities in jiu-jitsu?
I think people are getting more polarized, unfortunately, a lot like the political climate in our country. What you're seeing now is, some big names saying more outlandish and divisive, stupid things. And now you're seeing even good people that are coming up that, are trying to be maybe like, anti-racist, pro-queer and trans and, and all that. Sometimes they're starting to retaliate by being super like, now you've got to be communist or like, it's starting to get a little wild. And it's almost like, I think people are, it's almost like American politics. You're like, what is there just a school where everyone's cool and we're all, training together? Do I have to subscribe to politics or this, this whole thing? And so that's what I see. I see people are starting to get like, real righty and real lefty, and again, not leaving a lot of room for most of us in the middle who just, want to have fun and be in a good gym and learn good jujitsu and make sure everyone's just safe and welcome and included.
I do want to point out that a lot of that's my train of thought here, but a lot of just social justice movements, such as being anti-racist, supporting the LGBTQ community, to some people that is seen as being extremely far left when it should.
Which I'm not. I'm not like that. Like
no,
I'm
I know.
pretty. Yeah.
No, I know, but like,
just so you all know.
No, I know.
Okay.
I know you. But I think that is troubling as well when people say leave the politics out of jiu-jitsu and social rights, like they shouldn't be considered politics, but they are.
No, you're totally right. It is.
Yeah.
Everything is politics, and that's absolutely, me, that's not what I meant.
Yeah.
No, we keep social justice in jiu-jitsu. I'm just saying, like, I notice a lot of people pulling to these extremes, and it's like, well, okay, I want to be this person, but I don't know if I want to have to subscribe to everything this gym now has to stand for.
No, I totally understand, but that's what I'm saying is that you see that on I hate to be like a both sides person, but you do see it on both sides. But I do notice that some people, and I'm not talking about the people in this conversation, because I think, we all support everybody and love everybody. But some people do see, if a gym puts up, a flag, and some people like a rainbow flag and somebody's like, oh, that means that they're like super far left and like ultra whatever. And really it's just saying like, hey, this is a safe place. If you are gay, if you're trans, like you can train here, just
Yes.
sending like that message. And I
Well,
think that's
everything's been
something like that.
politicized now, and it's all done on purpose, and they're using social media against us. And we jump in hook, line, and sinker to everything now, and so that's a deeper societal
Yeah.
issue that's going on right now. But I believe it's directly social media's fault. I have a lot of friends on both sides of the political aisle, we'll say, right? And I've never, and I'm old. I'm 46, so I've had friends on both sides of the aisle for a long time, and I've never seen anything as like we're more polarized now than we were back in my mom's era. It's super weird. And I believe that it's directly because of social media. And then whenever these guys who are running a school, they go and say something extreme on one side or the other, and they get a lot of positive feedback from a certain group, then they kind of go all in on it, which alienates your students.
Yep.
This is what I tell all my, because I have an association, all my instructors, I make this very clear. Your political affiliation is jujitsu. Your religion is jujitsu. Your talk about whatever, everything should be jujitsu. It shouldn't be. We shouldn't try to mix in politics with all that stuff because you're hurting your bottom line. If I can't have hardcore Republicans and hardcore Democrats in the same room training together, then I've failed. And so I'm very much a moderate. So I mean, whatever. But I think that having this this divide between everybody that's going on is damaging, not just for jiu-jitsu, but for humans. We can have difference of opinions. I've got one of my best friends. He is completely different ideology. His ideology is completely different than mine, but we are best freaking friends, and we can talk about these things in a debate type fashion, and we don't get upset about it at all. And if we're not going to be able to have conversations with people that have different views than us, and we're going to be in our own echo chamber, that's going to make things way worse. And I see that happening more and more and more. And now jiu-jitsu gyms are becoming divided, and stuff. That's bad news for us. I
I
care about
agree.
the jiu-jitsu as a whole and where we're going to go in the future. And if we really want to have staying power and go somewhere bigger than where we're at now, we need to be neutral. I have a Switzerland flag that hangs in my gym, and it hangs in my private training room area where this is the only place I hang any kind of flags in. But it's because we're Switzerland. It doesn't matter if you're far right, far left, in the middle, but it doesn't matter. Gay, trans, whatever you are, you could be a dump truck. It doesn't matter. And we love you the same. We just want your jiu-jitsu to be good. And whenever you start using your platform, which a lot of people, because of they're a professor or whatever, it gives them a platform and a voice. Whenever you start using that for things other than jujitsu, I think it's wrong. It's my personal opinion, though.
Yeah, I agree with that to a point. But I do think there comes a point when, like, at what point do some people's politics start harming other people? If our disagreement in politics is like, I don't like fiscal responsibility for, probably stuff that is beyond my range of knowledge, like that's fine, whatever. But like, if you're telling me that Black people shouldn't be recognized as people, that is a political opinion of
That's a human
some
rights
people.
violation, though.
Exactly.
That's a far right opinion.
Exactly. And
It's a
so if you have,
fascist.
exactly. So if you have people like that who are coming into the gym and could then pose a risk, if you have a racist person coming into the gym voting against, racial protection policies, and they're coming into your gym and putting people that they're prejudiced against at risk of harm, like, I don't want you in my gym. I will not roll with you. I will not help make you better at violence.
Well, that goes back to the whole, if you're the owner, professor, whatever, it is your
Yeah,
due diligence to make sure that you're giving the superpower to people who are going to use it for good.
exactly.
Because if you give
Exactly.
superpowers to somebody that's evil, you are creating a super villain. And so it's
Exactly.
your responsibility, and it's on the instructor who does that. So you definitely have to watch your group. It's called knowing your cattle. You have to know your cattle, know your group, and make sure that you can weed those people out. The problem is that people need it, students, they need bodies in the room, and so they will accept whatever. I was guilty of this when I first started a long time ago. And I would just take whoever would come in because, man, I just needed to keep the doors open, back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And eventually that changed. I was a blue belt at the time, so I was just trying to do jiu-jitsu, and so I would accept anybody in there. And later on, I realized that listen, I'm giving people a superpower, and I'm not going to give it to people that could harm others with that superpower. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, because it's one thing to be like, I think taxation is theft, and it's a
Right.
whole nother thing to say, trans people shouldn't be training, or that kind
That's
of
right.
stuff. So I guess it's good we all made that distinction.
Yeah. It ties back into the cult-like mentalities. If you do have somebody in a position of power who takes that stance and they poison their students with that stance, and then those students go on to continue with jiu-jitsu, move up the ranks, and now those are the black belts. Like, you are going to have a legion of black belts who subscribe to those ideas. So again, it all comes back to, having that responsibility as a leader, but also being educated as somebody who isn't an upper belt, and being able to make that choice and saying, hey, like, I recognize that behavior, or I have heard that this behavior is bad from this instructor. I don't want to become, like you had mentioned, Ty, like, if you're going to turn someone into a black belt, you want to make sure that they have the mentality for that as well. Like you mentioned, you don't want to create asshole black belts. You want to create black belts who are, like, I guess, black belts in mind as well as in skill, and that's, you as a student and I'm hoping that these kind of discussions that we're having will empower more students to recognize that and say, this isn't a good environment for me. I want to be somebody who is a black belt in here as well as, like, here, and that they will then leave those bad schools and grow up to be a black belt who can be empowering to those who need it, rather than empowering people to be bullies and, more violent people with violent ideologies.
Yep.
Well, I want to go ahead and close out with this final, we talked about a lot of heavy things today. And for somebody who's new to jiu-jitsu or never done jiu-jitsu, it can be kind of a scary deterrent, some of the things that we talked about. So I wanted to close out with the final thoughts on what are some things that somebody who's new to jiu-jitsu can look for as red flags for these type of, idol worshiping cult-like mentality gyms that perpetuate this kind of toxic behavior.
Anything that has control attached to it, other than them actually doing jiu-jitsu and controlling your physical body, they should not have control over any aspect of your life, any aspect of it. So as far as, like, in the gym, great. Yeah, you get certain rules in the gym, great. That's where it stops. So you don't control who they hang out with, who they talk to, what they say online. None of that's none of your business, or none of their business. And so if they start telling you what you need to wear and how many times you should show up and all that kind of stuff, that's a red flag.
Anything you want to add on?
I would say red flags would be like a lot of spaces, but no women. And obviously, locality, keep the locality in mind. But if there are no people of color, there's no, differences of gender, there's no families around. If the gym is full of a bunch of aggro dudes, if you're getting hurt a lot and nobody's explaining anything to you, if you feel like let me rephrase this, anybody new to any sport is going to not know what's going on, and you're going to kind of just try to follow everybody. If you feel scared or like you really don't know what's going on and you're getting hurt, and the people that are training with you aren't treating you like somebody who just started, maybe they're treating you like a punching bag, that's a red flag. And I would say opposite green flags, things to look for: women in the gym, gay, trans people in the gym, people of color in the gym, everybody. Look around at the people. Are they talking to each other? Are they laughing? Are they like, hey, what's your name? Welcome, come on in. Are they welcoming you? Are they you know, from all walks of life. Are there kids running around on the side of the mats? That kind of stuff. When you see those signs, I think those are green flags that you're probably at a better gym.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And there's three things that, cause when I have a student leave and go somewhere and I'll try to look for a gym for them, I will look at their pictures and I will look for three things. I look to see if there's families there, how many women are there, and are they smiling in their picture? It makes a difference. You'd be surprised at how many gyms don't want to smile in their picture. It's great to have some pictures where you're crossing your arms and looking tough or whatever. That's fine. But are there pictures where people are smiling, or is it just super serious all the time? And if there's no kids in any of those, and definitely no women, yeah, might want to look someplace else.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you both just said. I also, from my personal experience, I would look out for your instructor's temper. If you find out that your instructor kind of flies off the handle a couple times, that's a big red flag. Like, and obviously everybody loses control of their emotions every now and again. You don't know what somebody's going through at home. But if you have an instructor who's screaming at you in front of the other students, you don't want that person having you in a chokehold ever.
That is absolutely correct. You are right.
Yeah. And I think my biggest piece of advice for anybody in any situation is listen to your gut. If stuff is happening at your gym, even if you don't know concrete yes or no, even if you're, a day 3 white belt and something happens, or you're like, that felt a little weird, like jiu-jitsu is a little weird, but that felt a little extra weird. It's okay to trust that. It doesn't mean you have to peace out of the gym right away, but kind of tuck it in your back pocket. And if that keeps happening, like, talk to somebody. Even if it just happens once, talk to somebody about it. There's a million groups on Facebook, on chats on Instagram. Like, ask somebody, hey, this happened to me. It felt weird. And I just want to know if I should listen to this or if it's nothing. Ask people who are in your community as well, because somebody who is, a woman may interpret something differently than a man would. A little microaggression toward a certain racial group, if you ask a white person about that, they may be like, oh, that's nothing, you're being sensitive. Like, ask people in your community who that also affects and see what they think. So that would always be my advice, is like, listen to your gut. Doesn't have to be an immediate red flag. It can definitely be a yellow flag, and does add up to red flags.
Absolutely. Awesome.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. 100%.
Thank you so much for being a part of this discussion. It was
Thank
really
you, guys.
awesome that we were able to do it. I know we had this rough start. And thank you everybody for tuning in. I hope that this was an informative discussion for you. Please share if you know anybody out there who could benefit from listening to this. Thank you again, everyone, and for the support, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.
Yeah, thank you, Shama.
Thank you,
Avery,
guys.
and Liz.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, wonderful discussion, guys.